specializat în zone de conflict. Când nu merg în zone de conflict, mă ocup cu fotografie și cu scrisul despre festivaluri de film, de muzică din țară și din Europa. Vă mulțumesc în primul rând că sunteți prezenți astăzi alături de noi. După cum știți, vom discuta despre situațiile de criză care apar în cadrul evenimentelor mari, fie că vorbim de festivaluri, de concerte sau de adunări de public foarte mari. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As you probably know, today we're going to talk about crisis situations in festivals and in concerts. Well, lots of people gather. I will start by introducing the speakers today. So I'll start with the ladies, but everybody knows Codruța. She's still here with us. Hopefully she's okay. For those who don't know, she's the director of Armania Festival, and also she's responsible for what's happening today with this conference. In my right, it's Professor Chris Kemp. Hello, welcome. As you probably read about him, he's one of the best voices in regarding crisis situations, mass psychology, and lots of things which are connected with concerts, with big events, and he's a specialist, and also he's usually the guy who's in charge with, perhaps you can help me, with crisis situations in different events, like concerts, like sport events.
Yeah, so it's sort of things we do is this year we looked at Queen's and Edgbaston tennis tournaments to look at hostile vehicle mitigation and see what needed to be put in place. A couple of years ago, for instance, we worked at a massive event in the US, which was a whole town that had a festival, and 120,000 people a day came to this festival. We were parachuted in 7 days before, and the guy in charge said to us, right, he said, there's 120,000 people in this town, but only 6,000 people can see the main stage. How are you going to get more people to see the main stage? So that's the kind of thing that we deal with.
Thank you. And, sorry? You'll find it in a minute.
I went home.
Thomas Zivkovic is very well known as a co-owner of Barracuda Music. Also, he's organizing lots of big and important concerts and festivals in lots of places. Huge festivals. He will tell us more about that very soon. But as I said, I will start with ladies. So, Codruța, since we are talking about crisis situation, actually it's a question for all of you. Let's start by identifying what kind of crisis situations we can find in a festival, indoor and outdoor, of course, because lots of events are happening indoor, and we had some, unfortunately, terrible incident in Romania, indoor, and also, probably you all know, there are lots of tragedies in this kind of events.
Well, I think we have to start first, and thank you for coming, announcing our small crisis, which luckily doesn't jeopardize anyone. Dr. Arafat couldn't join the panel, and he should have been replaced by a colleague, but the colleague is also in a video chat with the chiefs in Bucharest, so we are in a mini crisis. We don't have the authorities on stage, but we hope they either make it very soon, if not from the private sector. I think we can learn a lot of things.
And we will send them the recording.
Well, we still hope they will manage, but if not, we still insist with the association, because I'm representing also AROC, the Promoters Association, that we will find an open door with them and start exactly what you were, Chris, saying in the panel before, putting people at the same table to find a common ground for health and safety. from my own experience, I'm doing events and festivals for the last 14 years. We have also another festival which is much bigger than Artmania, which is 12,000 capacity, and it's a field festival, which I don't like so much because when it's raining, it's super muddy. I learned that maybe lack of care, but sometimes ignorance can bring to disasters. Because I know as a collective disaster, it wasn't a bad intentioned incident. No one there really, because I know, unfortunately, because it was a painful event, all the people that were involved on all sides, from bar owners to people who were on stage to people in the audience. So it was just a chain of incompetence, of lack of knowledge, and of lack of understanding. When you reach a critical point, how fast it gets out of disaster, and it's exactly what before in the panel before it was meant, when time starts to compress, and then you need to get out of crisis situation within 30 seconds or 1 minute. And I think that in the case of collective, the video recordings were showing very clearly that from the moment the fire started, the firework reached the pillar, to the moment the flames reached the other part of the venue, because of the foam that was placed and wasn't fireproof, it was practically 1 minute. So of course you're at a show, it's loud music, you already had a couple of drinks. Then you think it was part of the pyros. I mean, you're there for fun. You don't expect within 1 minute the whole place to be in total fire. So I think, and that's what the conference is also meant, that people are more aware of how fast things can get out of control, and how fast, if incompetent people are in that place without knowledge of why we need to have several exits, why the materials need to be fireproof, how fast that can escalate, and also how people react into that situation. Because it is, from my own experience, it's not only the material situation outside which makes the situation worse, but it's exactly how people react into that. And I think that, Chris, you can tell us even more. Usually many people just run to one particular exit because they see the people being there. So
human behavior is a really interesting subject, because when you're in a fire, there are a number of things that people do. Because the way we look at evacuation capacities and evacuation times is not the same way the fire brigade look at it. They understand it because they give an amount of time for that safe evacuation to take place. Whereas we often calculate our evacuation strategies and times on everybody being at the door and then everybody being outside the door. The key thing is, how long does it take from where you are in that auditorium, in that club, to get from where you are to the door? Well, everybody say, well, maybe 10 seconds. Well, if you look at the work by John Syme, what he did was he looked at fires to find out what people felt. And the key thing that came out of it was 25% of people, when there's a fire in a room, will move towards it to have a look. Okay? So immediately, they're losing time. So the time frame shrinks. 50% of people will stand there saying, I'm not getting out here. If I move, I'll lose my place. So they stay in the auditorium. 25% of people will run like hell. So you're dealing with completely different types of people within the auditorium itself. And the other thing as well is when does it become a crisis? Because a fire, you say 1 minute. Well, between 1 and 4 minutes, the smoke inhalation and the other elements are there, because there's more than one thing with fire. You can get burnt, but smoke will kill you as well. So there's more than one aspect to it. So you're dealing with multifaceted aspects in that kind of a crisis. And when people panic, we did a piece of work at the O2 Arena in London, and we looked at how many people came in and left by the same exits. 75% of people go out through the same exit that they came in by as an entrance. Now, if you think about that, if there's a fire outside that entrance, where are they going to go? Straight into the fire. So to make them go to a different exit is almost impossible, because if they've left their coat somewhere, they would rather go through the fire to get their coat than they would to leave by a fire exit. So immediately the crisis sharpens because of the time it takes to leave that building, gets smaller, because people are making their minds up what to do. Because remember, by the time you know there's a fire, somebody will have to have thought about setting the alarm off, gone to the alarm and set the alarm off, and then the people in the auditorium to recognise that it is an alarm and it's a real one. So again, it cuts it down. So it's getting people to understand that kind of concept.
Do you believe that would be possible? What I'm saying now, I know it's almost impossible, but it's that kind of question that appears. Is it possible, like in every big events, to have, first of all, a public, like usually happens when you got a plane, and there are safety instructions first, so people should know where are the exits. So people, welcome to this conference. You know, the exits are over there and over there in the backstage also. And do you believe it's possible? I mean, that would be a, I don't know, solution.
Do you listen to those instructions when you're on a plane?
I heard them so many times that I have to admit, no. But
well, that's the point, I think.
Yeah, but you know, if it happened in a concert, that would be something new. So at least first time, it will be something for the people, you know.
This is quite sad, really, because many, many years ago, Henrik and I and a number of other people were given some money to create one of those films, and we just didn't have time to do it. If anybody remembers, a guy called Bert Van Hawk was kind of in charge of the group then, and we received this grant to make one of those films. And we've often talked about it in the past, because if you think about it, the key to this is it's sign language. It's not actually, nothing has to be said, because on a plane you see somebody go, so you immediately know that there are exits on that side and at the back. If somebody has to tell you that, it's too late, because you could have been blown up or burnt. Yeah? So to be able to do something through non-verbal communication is really key. So somebody standing on a stage just making the signs might be enough to save some people. You know, so it is an important point, even though it seems a bit daft when you think about it initially. If somebody was to do something like that, it might have a huge effect.
So that will take me to, we have a question? Okay. Oh, yeah, we have some time for Q&A, but yeah, you can, yeah, sure, at the microphone.
Hello, I'm
Can you
Dan.
introduce yourself?
Yes, that's what I was doing.
Okay.
My name is Dan. I'm a blogger. I also work at a national radio station in Romania. I have a question regarding human behavior. You said you gave some percentages earlier, and I was curious to know if these percentages are influenced by the age of the audience, their education, or even by the culture of the country they're in. Because I tend to think this is an uneducated guess, but I tend to think that their behavior might be quite different in the same situation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you look at some of the work that's been done in football stadiums, then the people who cause the most difficulties are young children, because they get underneath your feet when you're trying to get out, and older people because they move very, very slowly. And the slower you move, the more likelihood there is of slips, trips and falls. People falling downstairs and that kind of thing. So yes, it is. And culturally, audiences at every festival I've ever been to in any different country have been different, because they react in different ways. Even to when an act comes on in England, and it comes on in Denmark, and then it comes on in Serbia, the reaction of the audience is entirely different as well. So it does change depending on where you are. And also, some countries that we go to and we work, there is a very compliant attitude by the people who are there. So if somebody says everybody will leave now by the nearest exit, everybody will go. But in other countries, you would say everybody will now leave by the exit. Everybody stands there because they want their place and they want to see the show that's going on. So yes, the answer to your question is in human behavioural terms, yes, it does depend on all of those different factors.
Thank you. Thomas, we talked earlier about crisis situations that you met in your career. And we were talking about weather, and we know we had some festivals here in Romania affected by the weather, but, well, there are lots of them actually. And I was curious about what kind of crisis situations you can meet in festivals usually. Which are the most frequent crisis situations?
Well, for No Rock Festival, which we hold mid-June, since 2005, it's a greenfield, which means we built everything there. And I mean, as we're out in nature, it's either muddy or dusty. Obviously we have been throughout the years, we've been affected by extreme weather conditions as well. I remember, I think it was in 2011, where we had really strong winds, a storm, without rain, and the complete site was dried up. And it was before a thunderstorm, and when I looked out of the backstage, I saw just a huge cloud of sand, and it looked. In the first moment, I had the feeling of, okay, now it's all over, yeah, because I mean, it was really unbelievable, yeah, but. We had a really good evacuation plan, I think, and it was the co-headlining act playing, so a lot of people were already on site, but we have evacuated that site within 10 minutes, I think.
How many people?
At that time, we had 50,000 per day. And yeah, well, it's obviously how it depends on how quickly and how competent you can react to those scenarios that can happen. And obviously, it's also very important for open air festivals that you monitor the weather, that you're always aware of what's going on. I mean, years ago I told you that we had, after that there was 1 year where I think 3 stages collapsed at different festivals, and it was really getting scary and scarier. And then we employed a weather expert on the festival side as well. But the thing is, the weather is getting so unpredictable, and that guy was sitting in the production office in front of his computer, talking to the people in his office on the phone, and then I can remember we asked him, so what can we expect? Yeah, and he was kind of like, yeah, well, these are all scenarios, yeah, and we said, yeah. But what do we expect? Yeah, and he didn't say anything concrete because if he says something, it might be held against him. Yeah, if something different happens, then yeah. And but the thing is, in the meantime, I think we have experience in monitoring the right websites and being in contact with the right weather stations to be able to not predict but be aware of what might be going on. Yeah, and I think that's the most important. And then of course have a good evacuation plan.
I have one question to you, Thomas. When you said we evacuated the site, I mean you have 50,000 people in a field. Everybody would just think, okay, you're in a field, you're in open space. Where do you evacuate them? Where do you put them? Where do you send them? I mean, what's happening with all that 50,000 people which are practically in open field?
The most important is, I think, if a thunderstorm comes up, I mean, it's the stage, I think, is a very critical point, yeah, where things can fall off, yeah, and where obviously if there's lightning, strong winds, heavy rain, yeah, I mean it's just kind of like we made people leave the core area, which means is that us as promoters, Mia on one stage and my colleague on the other stage, yeah, and through the, I mean, we have those video screens and everything where everything is already prepared, yeah, that please leave the site because we expect thunderstorm, and please make sure that you go to the camping site, into your tent, and make sure you're safe, yeah. And we not only have that on the signs of the video screens, but we also announce that on stage, yeah. And we will make sure that the people, I mean, obviously there is alcohol, there are drugs involved on festivals, yeah. So not everybody is sober and willing and able to understand what you try to communicate. But I think it's the most important that you have it in signs, and then you have an announcement, of course people reacting, and then if you just speak in a calm way and try to convince people. I mean, I would say 95% of the Austrian audience understands that this is not for fun reasons, yeah, and they leave. But you always have people that try to protest, yeah, and are against it, yeah, and then you just have to keep calm. I think that's the most important. That you must make sure that we evacuate the site. It's a thunderstorm. It will not last for forever. So, and we will make sure the bands are willing to continue. The bands are willing to are informed, yeah, and we will continue as long as the situation improves, yeah. So the most important is that you evacuate the core area and try. I mean, it's difficult on the green field, of course, yeah. And I mean, it's not. I mean, nobody can be 100% safe at an Novarock site. I mean, I have to admit that if I said that, yeah, it would just not be true, yeah, because I mean it's a green field and people can stay in their tents and everything, and of course, but the thing is that people, yeah, cannot be hit by something falling off the stage, something like that. Yeah.
Now that's the promoter in me coming to it more questions. In a crisis situation, when you realize the weather is getting really bad, where is the moment when you as a chief of the festival or as the promoter take the, say we need to close it? That's a question for you from practical, also for Chris. Who needs also to advise you it's not safe anymore? Who are the people involved who need to say, okay, we stayed at this table, we analyzed the situation, and it's clearly the best interest is to close, because it's a difficult decision to make. It involves a lot of money, a lot of work, and also a lot of responsibility towards artists, towards the audience. So I know from my own experience that it's a very difficult decision to take, and you need advisors. Who are these people who are involved or who should be involved?
But if you think about any festival, there should be an event liaison team, yeah? So that emergency team would convene together from people from the police, fire service, from hospitals. No, it would be paramedics. Sorry, my brain went dead then. Paramedics. You've also got the main protagonist, the security team. You've got the person who's the overseer of the event. You've got people in a room who would be able to be convened together to make a decision based on the facts. Because it's about facts. It's not about we think this is going to happen. It's actually based on those facts. So those people are experts. Never trust anybody who's not an expert, because you bring people in because they are experts. So those people would get together and they would make a measured decision on whether to stop the festival or not. I worked at Wacken Festival last summer, and it rained continuously for 4 days before the festival. And just before the festival, it also had a terror threat made on the festival, so it was getting a bit dicey. And in places on the main stage, near the main stage, there was between 12 and 18 inches of water and mud. I mean, okay, rock. People who go to rock festivals love the mud, and you can throw anything at them and they still love it, whether it's dry, wet, or whatever. But it was getting to a stage where it looked pretty dicey, and they had a meeting in the afternoon to decide, you know, what they would do about it. But the thing about that is they didn't just have the meeting, they wrote down what they would do for the next year to make sure the festival was safe. So when I did a report at the end of it, part of that report was linked to what they'd identified, which was, let's level the site so you can't get areas where there are big dips that fill with water. Now the beauty of that means, because what happens when you get lots of dips, because about 10 to 15% of that front area was in water where you couldn't actually stand, so people were standing around the outside of those areas, which meant that they were moving into other areas where it was very crowded, because suddenly 10 to 15% of your arena floor has gone. So you have to move to somewhere else where there aren't people. Where there are people. So you move into those other areas, which causes problems. Now, to make a decision then, the decision perhaps should be, if that's going to happen, that you do stop the festival for a while, because otherwise, if more and more water comes in there and more areas are where you can't stand in them, then you're going to crush the people more and more into areas where there is room for them to stand. So you have to make big decisions then to make that happen. Luckily, it stopped raining, and so there wasn't a decision to be made. But at that time, it's quite dicey, you know, with what would happen and how those decisions are going to be made. So it's very important that you trust the experts, because they know what's happening, and they are accountable for this. So if somebody dies, they're accountable for it. If somebody drowns in the water, they're accountable for it, because they had the option and opportunity to stop that show. So you have to bear that in mind when it comes. So people should make adult, strong decisions that mean that people are safe. Forget about the money. If the money's not there and a band is cancelled, that's tough. But if somebody dies, you've got it on the conscience for the rest of your life. So the important thing is, forget about the money, forget about the bands. It's about the show, and can it go ahead? And I think it doesn't matter how big the artists are, they will understand at the end of the day that the decision had to be made for the safety of the people who were watching. Because no artist would want anything to happen to that audience. So they would also back any decision that was made that was the right decision at the right time for the right reasons. And that's why we have experts to make those decisions.
So before, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to follow up.
Thomas, just 1 second. I have to say hello to Mr. Cole now. Cosmin Balcu, Chief Inspector of Emergency Service in Sibiu here. Thank you for joining us. Okay, sorry.
Sorry for interrupting. Now, I just want to follow up on this one. I mean, it's what Chris said is 100%. I agree 100%, because I never had an artist complaining about a decision we made in terms of extreme weather situations, yeah, and that we had to stop the show. And the other thing is, of course, we also have the local authorities at Novarock, which also tell us what to do, where we have to watch this or what that, to make sure we are out of liability in terms of certain things, yeah. But in terms of stopping the festival because of bad weather situations, which we had several times over the years, we never waited until any authority told us you have to stop it. So it's always for us safety first, yeah, because we are insured for the festival. We have bad weather insurance. We have cancellation insurance and everything, yeah. And in the end, I mean, we don't want to be responsible if somebody dies at our festivals, because we did not look at any warnings. Yeah, so that's the most. I mean, it's in the end, it's what Kudruta asked. It's your own decision. It's you are responsible of your event, and you must take measures to make sure that it's a safe event. And of course, there are authorities, there's security team, and everything. But in the end, it's you as the promoter who's generally liable and responsible for the things that go on at your event.
This is why I can ask the same question for Kodruca, because she actually stole my question earlier. I had the same question in my mind, so please tell us about your experience. I mean, did you had to cancel, and how did you took that decision?
We didn't have to. It was last year at our Blaj Live Festival. We didn't have to cancel in the end. We had to stop the show for a while. But the weather was, it rained 80 liters for 5 days in a row per square meter. The production was starting to drown. We used the fire department, or they tried to help us to pump water. But at some point, even they said, this is, I mean, it's for 5 hours already torrential rain. We can't compete with that. So all the weather sites were saying hurricane type of winds. And you could see that it was 40 degrees during the day. And by 5 o'clock, it was very humid, and you started to see how the clouds were building, and how like you could see the draft of the wind coming. And at some point it became really bad. But then, of course, we were talking all the time with the people with the weather, Meteo it's called in Romania, and with the fire department, with the gendarmes, and I said, do we need to stop it? How will it hit, or will it go through the festival site? When is the moment when I say it stops? Because people had fun. Everybody took their shoes off. It was a party in the mud. And at least there in that situation, no one could tell, oh, well, the weather people were telling, I can't say if the core of the storm will go through the festival site. If it will go through the festival site, everything that's here will just fly away. I mean, there won't be any standing tent at this point, like how the weather is. So we decided to stop the music, because we said that if it gets bad, we can communicate much easier with the people. We closed all the tents, like the electronica tent, it was sealed so that there's no wind coming in. And we weren't in the end, how do you say, hit by the core of the storm, because where it hit like 10 kilometers away, practically electricity pillars collapsed. So it was really bad. But no one from, let's say, the people that we were working was able to say, take the plug. I mean, we need to close it, we need to stop it. It's like, we don't know. It could hit or it can't. So at that point I said, okay, we open all the exits, we stop the show, and if this gets worse within the next 5 or 10 minutes, we just close the site. We tell people to get into the city center and all that. But for me as a promoter, of course, we have insurance because we have a big partner to that festival, a German company, and they are obliging us to have cancellation insurance. But as we have the example of the Greek festival, which almost got cancelled, if you know, because of the crisis, where this is also a different crisis situation, where the Greek state imposed the capital control. So they had practically 5 days before their event no access to their funds, which was clearly out of their control. They had the money in the bank, but they couldn't draw more than, I think, 60 or 100 euros per day, and they couldn't make any payments. The insurance company said, sorry, financial default. So in countries like Romania, that is also a big problem. Who gives me that paper, or who signs that I was right to stop the festival? Because we have a clear example, as I was saying, in Greece, which the insurance company didn't treat as I mean, it was clearly out of their control. They had the money, they could prove they had the money, but they were still told, no, I'm sorry, we include you to financial default, so you don't get anything. If you cancel, all is on you.
It's a terrible crisis.
So somehow this was my question, if there's any procedures or any like boxes to tick, you know, because at that point I think, and it's valid for every promoter, you're emotionally charged, because this can also alter the decision. You have all these responsibilities, and then is there any, and it's a question, any guideline, any checks that, okay, if this is happening, if this situation gets to this level, it's safe to close. I mean, you should close. And not end up into that time frame when the crisis hit, and then you don't have any more time for any more decision because everything escalates.
There is some American guidance that I've seen from their Festival and Event Association, and it's a booklet about what you should do in crisis, and there's weather conditions and there's different ones that are written, and they have tick boxes and identified different elements that are taking place. And that's quite an interesting piece. I hadn't seen it before. We worked in America, and then they had it there. And they had a weather station on top of a car park, which identified what was going to happen any time during the day. So every day we were there at 2:30 in the afternoon, kind of small twisters would go through the city, and everybody knew they were coming, and would just go inside. You'd stop for the time they were there, and then you'd start again. So they knew if anything untoward happened in the weather, they would be able to identify what to do because of the system they employ. I have a copy of it somewhere, and I can send it to you if you wish. It's quite an interesting document, and it's very far ahead of what we were doing at the time. I'm not sure if anybody knows if we've got anything in Europe. I'm not sure that we have.
Mr. Colonel, welcome again. Thank you for joining us. It's very important that the festival organizers work with local authorities and especially with people involved in crisis situation like you are, usually. So if something happens, you're the first one for helping any big event, any a festival like this one, for example, in any crisis situation. So how does it work in Romania usually? Is it a bureaucratic work to sign the papers with the organizers, usually help them in order to have a good experience for the people who are paying a ticket, or usually it works like we know in Romania very hard and no?
Da, eu o să vorbesc în românește, okay. O să vă rog să faceți traducerea. Vă mulțumesc și vă mulțumim pentru această invitație, această inițiativă, pentru tot ceea ce faceți. Vis-a-vis de întrebare, ca să trecem la subiect, sau mă rog, de ceea ce a spus, sunt mai multe lucruri corelate. Acum, bineînțeles că sistemele de organizare vis-a-vis de Europa sau de alte țări diferă. Diferă culturile, diferă mentalitățile. Bineînțeles, sau așa ce puțin credem, că noi suntem un stat mai birocratic. Da? Cu siguranță se întocmesc mai multe documente decât în alte țări. Vă pot spune din start. Cu siguranță. Sunt unele aspecte sau riscuri care le găsim în organizare sau în pregătirea misiunilor, care se regăsesc și în alte state sau altele care sunt cu tipicul nostru.
So, mainly he told us about the fact that, of course, Romania is a more bureaucratic state, and usually we do have these kind of problems, but the problems that we have in a festival, they're usually the same problems that you find in different other countries. So it depends on what kind of event you have and what kind of risks involved that event.
Deci, mai concret, probabil interesează foarte mult cum e la noi și ca să fac o comparație cu ceea ce dâns și fac. În primul și în primul rând analizăm riscul sau riscurile. După care ne stabilim misiunea, ne stabilim ce avem de făcut, ne stabilim resursa umană, tehnică, sau într-o viziune complexă, în sensul că pe lângă aceste activități de spectacole, conferințe, etc., avem și alte misiuni. Misiunea față de cetățean, misiunile celelalte speciale, dar și altele care sunt pe linie, să zic, NATO, militare și așa mai departe.
So mainly, first of all, how they proceed in Romania, they analyzing the risks first, and then they had to know the human resources that they have to be involved in that event, and considering that they usually have some other missions, military missions, NATO missions for these events.
Deci, practic, de aici pornim, să spun așa, să luăm toate problemele și în funcție și de numărul de participanți. Da? La Armenia s-a estimat 7.000. Au fost alte activități, poate cu 20.000, 30.000 de participanți. Cu siguranță există o pregătire în genul, ați spus, de bilete, de intrare gratuită, automat. Sunt alte riscuri din punctul nostru de vedere. Ceea ce noi până acum nu am exersat foarte mult, dar în ultimul timp începem să lucrăm, este gama de terorism. Până acum noi nu ne-am pus această problemă, până acum un an, să spun așa. De un an încoace începem să lucrăm, să analizăm și acest risc împreună cu instituțiile abilitate. Sunt foarte multe, dacă mă întrebați, sau ați spus de problemele pe care le întâmpinăm, sunt probleme legate de, eu știu, să spun așa, de fermitatea și de promptitudinea lucrurilor pe care le cerem și care unele se realizează și altele nu se realizează. Asta n-am întâlnit numai la organizatori români, ca să spunem că e o problemă a noastră națională. Nu. Ne-am lovit. Sunt multe lucruri care ne întâlnim poate cu o jumătate de oră înainte de a începe activitatea și vedem că nu este făcută. Și
puteți să ne dați câteva exemple ca să se înțeleagă mai exact?
Da, în general, capitală culturală și după aceea și la Music Media Awards și la Forța Azul, la activități cu public important. S-au stabilit anumite căi de evacuare, care știți foarte bine, nu că n-a vrut organizatorul să le respecte, dar fiind foarte multă populație, acele gardene au ajuns aproape că nu existau. Bineînțeles că noi gândim aceste situații de imprevizibil. De exemplu, în anii trecuți, la activitățile peste 20.000 de participanți, ne-am luat măsura să instalăm ca măsură medicală, prespitalicească, un spital de campanie. Pentru că în aceste, să spunem așa, spectacole, apar probleme care nu sunt foarte urgente, să spunem cod roșu, și care se pot trata în prespital, se pot rezolva în prespital din punct de vedere medical. Dacă noi nu am face această măsură, înseamnă că unitatea de primiri urgențe se va supraaglomera. Vom duce 200 de cazuri într-o oră și nici nu se poate trata, nu putem avea eficiență și nu putem avea un răspuns. Mai mult, blocăm poate cazurile grave.
Practic e un filtru care...
Este un filtru și am gândit acest lucru, l-am văzut și noi la Antold, nu pot să spun că l-am inventat noi, l-am văzut la Antold, Clujul a făcut prima dată în România, probabil a venit cu o experiență din afară. Acum, cred că ați văzut miercuri, vestea cea bună, în următorii 2 ani o să ne reînnoim și o să ne dotăm cu tehnică în valoare de 600 de milioane de euro. De exemplu, problema mare pe care Sibiu are, foarte mare, noi nu avem acum în intervenție o autoscară. Adică nu avem de ce să nu avem de ce să ne ascundem. Și vedeți că sunt intervenții unde este obligatorie o autoscară sau o platformă sau pachet de scări cu care să executăm o misiune la înălțime sau la înălțime mare. Sperăm că în luna noiembrie să ne dotăm cu această tehnică. Pe lângă această tehnică mai sunt și alte, să spun așa, neajunsuri. S-au făcut pași importanți în ultimii ani pe linia intervenției, pe linia dotării. Încă, și m-aș bucura că, nu numai în acest context, m-aș bucura să ne mai întâlnim. Nu din an în an, să ne întâlnim și între sau înainte de evenimentele pe care le organizați și să aflăm și punctul dumneavoastră de vedere. Adică care sunt nemulțumirile vis-a-vis de noi, care sunt neajunsurile pe care le vedeți, pentru că numai prin comunicare putem rezolva, spun eu și cred cu ardoare că putem rezolva toate aspectele.
Este foarte simplu, tot s-a vorbit aici despre a ieși în față. Sorry, I'll continue in Romanian. S-a vorbit despre ieșit în față și despre vorbit, așa că o să o rog pe Codruța să ne spună dacă a avut probleme din punctul ăsta de vedere. Și acum și în experiențele anterioare. Dacă tot vorbim și punem lucrurile pe față, haideți să vedem despre ce a fost vorba până acum, dacă au fost probleme, firește. Dacă nu, cu atât mai bine.
I can answer in English. You are understanding. From the authorizations point of view, we always, like Artmania, follow procedures. I can give one example, which was a very dramatic example from our point of view, and it was in relation with the fire department, but not the Sibiu Fire Department. In 2005, we were doing a show at the biggest Bucharest Arena. It was 6,000 capacity, nightly show, sold out. We submitted the documentation for the venue, for the show. It was very simple. Of course, unfortunately, it was the collective club fire where there were many casualties. And Nightwish, we already had ongoing documentation. They said it's normal, we give fireworks up. Everybody understands it wouldn't be a pleasurable experience at any point with anyone. For anyone, so we just want to proceed with the show in a normal way. It's a metal audience, it's a rock audience. The club which burned was a rock club, so out of respect for the people, we are not going to do it. But then we faced a very challenging problem, which we were not expecting to do. We realized, and I think this is a known knowledge within the Romanian authorities, that Romexpo Hall is not authorized. So practically the documentation for authorizing our temporary structures couldn't be given because the space in itself has no authorization for fire. So from that aspect we were okay, at that point I think it was also the tension of the moment very close to the collective fire, is that oh, you should have known. As, of course, coming from the private sector, as an organizer, and coming from Sibiu, I asked, how could I have known that the biggest Bucharest venue is not authorized for concerts when it does concerts for the last 25 years? I mean, what could have told me to know that this couldn't have, I mean, not in my wildest dreams I would have thought that, because when the contract was done with the venue, it was clearly specified, Nightwish concert. The venue is only authorized for fairs, for expos, because it's a very old venue, built in the 60s, and it doesn't respect the old standard, like the new standards. So I think it was a decision that all buildings before the 90s, they can function on the initial authorization, but if they use the venue for a different meaning than the initial authorization, which was an expo in this case, they need to get reauthorized. And it needs to get authorized for a crowded venue, as for a concert. So practically we faced the situation that we did the show. I did it on my own responsibility. I think I was so horrified even when someone fainted in the front. I was just staying on top and looking, and then we had one person who fainted and they took it out, and then, oh, I didn't eat anything for today. I was like, here, chocolate, please, here, chocolate. I almost, because I realized that I'm a private promoter, which would have been liable for anything that would have happened in that space, even if it would have had anything to do with our decisions or us being badly organized, because practically it was an event that didn't exist. So I think this is a problem that everybody is aware in this country, that things need to be done for the venues to get authorized. And this is for what the Promoters Association is pushing. I've been at a meeting in Bucharest at the fire department, and we asked, is going to Rome Expo venue to be closed if it's not going to get authorized? Of course, they can organize exhibitions, but will they be stopped? And we have a law that says that until the end of the year, I think, every venue needs to get into play, like they need to uplift all their safety measures. But the Promoters Association, even though it is against our own interest, because we will end up without venues, we will say the venues should invest. The state should invest in the infrastructure. So many people maybe blamed ISU, but I wouldn't blame them. We have a law. And that's what I'm trying to make also my colleagues from the association aware.
Excuse me, one question. Who's the owner of that venue which you mentioned?
The state.
So that's, I think, the main problem with the main venues. So as the Promoters Association, we will fight, even though we will remain and we'll do shows only in summertime, is that if we have a law, it should be applicable. And it should be applicable also to the state venues, so to say. And it shouldn't be only based on, and I think it's a political decision. And we get here in the area where I think the fire department and the organizers are on the same side. Because if something happens, they and we will be blamed. While no one in the political sector is saying, okay, we have this problem. We have these venues. What are we going to do with them?
So that takes us to the main problem, and that's the law. That should be changed.
Exactly, and that's what I'm always enforcing or supporting within the association, and want to make every single promoter in this country aware, is that the fire department can only apply the law. They don't interpret it, they apply it. So we need to work on the basics. We need to make a clear regulation which is related to events, and take every particular type of event.
I think this is really interesting, because something came into my mind then while you were talking, which relates back to your first question as well, but it's pertinent to what we're talking about now, is that when you do something like this, you need to have a risk register of every possible risk that could ever take place in the venues or the areas that you're working in. Because if you don't have one, and a risk does come up and you're part of what's going on, then you're still liable. So you need to find out as many risks as you can. If you think about force majeure and act of God, those two things now have changed. So in relation to weather, we were talking about before, the link to the risk assessment and event plan are absolutely crucial. Because if you put in your event plan and your risk assessment all the aspects that you identified about weather and what you would do in that situation, then you're covering yourself as you go through the elements. And that will give you a checklist of what you should and what you shouldn't do. But when it comes to a venue where you're not sure of what there could be underneath it, it becomes very difficult in a very grey area. Having to be in the situation that you were in that night, I don't know whether I would have gone ahead and done the gig. because the accountability and the responsibility and also the liability that would be on my head was so huge. But had you been able to work with the authorities, sit there and look at what all the possible risks might be, go through all the documentation and then draw up a risk assessment and a register, you'd have been able to tick off one by one the issues that would come up or could come up. And I suppose that would be the next way forward, is to work with all the authorities to do that. Otherwise, will you ever be able to put events on there again?
Well, we personally, or Artmania, will definitely not put their events again. But at the same time, I have to say that the authorities were there with us. So we had a command room, and the fire department, the anti-terror was there, because it was after the collective flight was the Bataclan, and then we had the gendarmerie and we had the police. So I think it was the safest place in Romania at that point, but we just didn't have papers. So from that point of view, I have to say they completely supported us, and they also realized, because we also had to assess one thing which was brought into the discussion, and I think it's a different, when you assess the risks, how do you cancel a show on show day or the day before? Because it was just then you have 6,000 rock fans already in despair because of what happened. Close friends of them died. It's a big scandal, and the level of emotional reactions within the people in the whole country was unbelievable. People weren't reacting naturally or normally. It was just blame gaming with no relation to any logic or any healthy thinking. So then the problem was, do we close a show of 6,000 people and put a name on this venue, or it's closed because they don't have a fireproof, with the exactly same audience which had this disaster, and it was also because of fire? How are these 6,000 people to react when they come to the venue and see it closed because of this reason?
Aș vrea să fac câteva lămuriri, că riscăm să înțeleagă cu totul și cu totul altceva invitații. Într-adevăr, este multă birocrație. Ceea ce ai vorbit, m-am uitat și la grimasa ta, Codruța, și la fermitatea cu care ai spus, înțeleg și deduc foarte simplu că te-au supărat în momentul respectiv. Aș vrea să fac câteva completări foarte scurte. 1. Să înțeleagă invitații din afară că Inspectoratul pentru Situații de Urgență are 3 competențe, să spun așa. Pe lângă partea de pompieri, noi răspundem, să zic așa, generic, răspundem de partea de civil protection, de asemenea de intervenția medicală, primul ajutor medical. Tot în acel SMURD, da? Acest SMURD, tot în ISU face parte. Mai departe, trebuie să recunoaștem, eu cred că trebuie să recunoaștem că, sau eu cel puțin în 10 ani, nu am văzut ca în permanență oamenii să-și păstreze cuvântul. Noi de aceea facem hârtii, planuri, trebuie să fie avizate, semnate până începe spectacolul, pentru că dacă se întâmplă ceva, nimeni nu-și mai recunoaște responsabilitatea. Și o spun din experiență, credeți-mă. Și este tragic ceea ce spun. Pe mine nu mă bucură acest lucru. Însă, dacă poate am fi mai responsabili, și spuneam foarte bine înainte, dacă am fi mai responsabili pe riscurile și fiecare să-și asume riscurile pe care le are, misiunile pe care le are, eu cred că ar trebui să facem puține hârtii. Din punct de vedere că vorbeai de legislație, este și legislație mai veche, într-adevăr, pe partea de normative. Da, trebuie să o recunoaștem, sunt poate normative de 20 de ani, învechite, depășite de realitatea vieții, de investiții, de situațiile care sunt, dar mai trebuie să recunoaștem un lucru. În România, până la colectiv, dacă mergeam la cineva și spuneam haideți să ne luăm măsurile prima dată și după aceea să organizăm și să desfășurăm, vă spun, știți care era răspunsul? Cât este amenda? Păi 500 de lei. Ok, ia 500 de lei și dispari. Eu vă spun din punctul meu de vedere. După colectiv a început, a fost o tragedie, din emoția care s-a creat, au început să se trezească în noi spiritele de responsabilitate. Totodată și de frică, mă refer în cei care sunt cu răspunderea, că sunt primari, că sunt pompieri, că sunt firme de pirotehnie și așa mai departe. Eu îmi permit să deschid și exemplul nostru de la Sibiu, Casa de Cultură, că știu că mai de dimineață a fost o nemulțumire. La Casa de Cultură, Iisus Sibiu a făcut înainte de colectiv 10 ani cel puțin controale de 2-3 ori pe an. S-au scris problemele care s-au descoperit an de an. Putem prezenta documente. Să nu credeți că n-am fost controlați de eșalonul de superioare dacă am închis bine sau dacă nu am, sau dacă am avut abuz în serviciu. Am fost cercetați pentru asta. În fiecare an am luat măsurile pe care se puteau lua pe legislația din acel moment. Toți directorii, unii arestați, alții nu, ne plăteau amenda în fugă și nu se realiza nimic. Haideți să spunem adevărurile care sunt. Aici suntem noi. Eu mă bucur că avem această discuție, vă spun sincer, și mă bucur, a spus un lucru foarte important, că nu desfășura acel eveniment, chiar și cu riscul financiar, riscul de emoție de la spectatori sau de la participanți, că de ce nu se... Noi tot timpul facem presiune. Nu vreau să povestesc, poate când voi ieși la pensie voi scrie o carte cu capitolul Casa de Cultură, să vă spun ce presiune a fost pe mine. Nu vreau să fiu victimă aici și nici să epatez. Nu o să intru în detaliu. Dar nu este normal. Dacă nu respectăm, haideți să fim realiști. Pentru că, bun, nu sigilam Casa de Cultură. Să făcea un eveniment, se întâmpla colectiv, pentru că se putea întâmpla, vă spun, nu sunt luate măsurile, acolo nu erau luate nici măcar cât la colectiv. Și după aceea, cine era vinovatul de serviciu? Unul singur. Unul singur. Și toată lumea s-a arunca, imediat să termin, și toată lumea arunca moneda acolo. Răspundem, venim, vă ajutăm, știți foarte bine și cred că Codruța poate spune, și ceilalți organizatori, nu știu, nu l-am văzut pe Ovidiu Runcă sau pe alții, încercăm să venim în sprijin. Nu neapărat să exagerăm prin solicitare de documente suplimentare. Dar, din păcate, la noi, în momentul în care vine un procuror, ne întreabă după virgulă. Nu după ceea ce am stabilit noi ca oameni. Și v-am spus, din păcate, foarte mulți uită destul de repede. Eu vă spun din experiență și credeți-mă că sunt cu cele mai bune intenții, deși am fost acuzat că opresc cultura în Sibiu. Citez. Nu, vă spun, lucrurile sunt cu totul. Nu vreau să iau microfonul și să nu mai las. Mulțumesc.
That was what I was trying also to say before, and that's what we are supporting with the Promoters Association, because the law has a problem.
May I just add something or say something? Sure. Because I mean, I do not disbelieve your honesty, sir, but what you said in general sums it up. What's the problem? And the problem is the lack of the legal framework. Yeah, and it's not that somebody does something wrong or tries to prevent something. It's just the legal framework, because if the state runs a venue and in the end doesn't have the permission to do so, I mean, there's something completely going wrong. No. And if Codruța said it was the safest place in Romania, I mean, it wasn't, because it was not safe for the promoter who risks his private fortune to put up a show for people.
Nu vorbim de aceeași... Sunt două locații. Eu nu mă pot exprima la situația Codruței din București. Nu am fost acolo, nu mă pot exprima, nici să o contrazic, nici să... Eu m-am referit la, și vreau să înțelegeți un pic care este situația, detaliez în 3 propoziții. La Casa de Cultură nu exista luată nici o măsură, nici de detecție, nici de semnalizare, nici de stingere, de sfumare și altele. Nu era luată nici o măsură de siguranță privind prevenirea și stingerea incendiilor. Nu vorbim de cadrul legal. Cadrul legal există. Că are sincope, acum depinde din ce punct de observare îl privim. Dar legislația este cum este, trebuie respectată și la acea locație nu este luată nici o măsură, subliniez. Degeaba mi se spune că am schimbat fotoliile și scaunele și tapetul pe pereți. Pe mine nu mă interesează acest lucru. Pe mine mă interesează siguranța participanților.
No, but that was what exactly, and I have to say that even though people are totally against for closing this venue in Sibiu, me personally, I'm supporting it. Because if we don't force the politicians to, and we get back, now I'm thinking to the first panel, when we were talking about multiculturalism, how the state operates, what they invest, when they don't invest. I think we come to this point connected to that panel, that maybe the state should invest in the infrastructure, that it shouldn't be that the fire department is forced to close a venue, which should be closed if it's not having the papers. I totally agree with that. And I agree, Rome Expo should be closed if they don't expect the regulations, because otherwise it's happening exactly what you're saying, putting me as a private, and not only me, but the organizers in a position that, I mean, they take the risk. And the state's obligations, from my understanding, is that they should be a mediator, and they should, they should offer a safe environment. We shouldn't close everything, we should make them safe. And maybe that's where we need to start investing money. And it's clearly not the fire department, not the gendarmes. I felt with that authorities there, we were safe, and they took their own responsibility in the end, because it would have been their responsibility if something would have happened. But in the end, and that's where I'm saying the legislation needs to be changed, and that is a political decision. And that's what we are fighting for, and I think from that point we are on the same side.
Da, vreau să mai fac o mică mențiune. Uitați aici, de exemplu, în această frumoasă sală, este autorizată. Sunt luate măsurile. De ce se poate? Mai mult, ca să înțeleagă, Casa de Cultură nu este a statului român. Este a sindicatelor, iar sunt în domeniul privat. Statul român nu poate investi acolo într-un mod privat. Ca să înțeleagă invitații noștri care a fost problema.
The venue that he is talking about is a venue in Sibiu, which doesn't belong to the state, and it's belonging to the syndicates, which of course they want to continue to hold shows, but the venue has no fire detectors, has no.
Yeah, but the thing is, whoever owns something, I mean, I think this doesn't matter. I mean, it's just people. There should be rules established which are valid,
and applying the law.
And of course the authorities should apply the law, and everybody should stick to that legal framework. That's what I just said. Yeah, it's not that somebody disbelieves that the measures are done. Yeah, and I mean, whoever owns it. Yeah, I mean, if it's the state or if it's the private sector, whoever owns it should take the measures to make it possible for somebody who rents the place to do a show, whatever, a concert, theater, or whatever, to be able to do it there as safe as possible.
I would agree with this, because what you've got here is a state of inertia. Nothing's happening. So you close the venue, and that's it. So who's then going to lead on this to make the venue safe to be opened again? Because, as you rightly say, nobody will go there and do anything because they can't, because the venue is closed and it hasn't got the right permits or licenses. So who then takes charge of it? It's okay as saying that because it's public, then the private sector have no call on it, or saying that it's private, so the public sector have no call on it. But that means everything falls down in the middle, and there's nobody to do anything. So who then takes responsibility to get those permits?
Well, that's what we are stating, for example, with association, that we have a national problem from that point. And my approach to the authorities was always in Bucharest. The Ministry of Culture has a ministry, so it's of national interest. We assess the situation on the field and realize we have no venues. It doesn't matter to whom they belong, to the state, to the private sector, to the syndicates. So if we still want to have culture and we still want to have shows, we need to start investing in them. And if we realize within the private sector there's no money to invest in a big venue, which it's clearly not existing, then maybe it should be the state's priority as a public policy to invest, to create a safe infrastructure where we could choose shows, where the fire department can say, this is safe, we come here, and you can bring the added value through culture.
Are you going to lobby for this?
We are definitely, and that's why we are pushing for venues to be closed unless they respect regulations, because otherwise we won't have a healthy market. We won't have a healthy market based on added value brought through creativity, on sustainability, on a long-term thinking. We will have I was put in a situation where I had practically no option. Or, of course, I could have cancelled, but maybe it would have been more damaging, in my opinion, to the Romanian music industry than at that point. We decided to go on only at the point where the liability insurance, the insurer told us that the liability is still in place, except for fire hazard. So we had so many fire people there that fire hazard was also impossible.
So do you have, I mean, in the UK we used to have lots of unlicensed raves which just took place in halls that were derelict or whatever. Do you have that problem here in Romania, that people are thinking, well, I'm not going to go through this process, I'll just hold an event here and hope for the best?
Clearly, yes. I think that only the bigger promoters are really trying to work hand in hand with the authorities, and lately also more clubs are getting regulated because they have a lot of controls, which I think they should.
Dacă permiteți, pot să spun că 90%, cel puțin vorbesc de județul Sibiu, County Sibiu, 90% din localuri sunt autorizate, mă refer la domeniul acesta, mă refer, și doar 10% nu sunt autorizate. Să înțelegem foarte bine, nu suntem într-o situație alarmantă. Însă au fost și locații în care, sau care până acum nu și-au luat autorizația. Asta nu înseamnă, deci una singură s-a închis, asta nu înseamnă că nu s-au desfășurat activități culturale, artistice și așa mai departe. Am compensat noi, cel puțin ISU Sibiu, am compensat atât la Festivalul de Teatru, Internațional de Teatru, cât și la alte activități organizate, am compensat cu măsuri de asigurare, de prevenire, de, eu știu, ce s-au putut face în așa fel încât
prezență mai numeroasă.
Prezență mai numeroasă, nu neapărat să deranjăm, adică nu am pus pe scenă pompieri sau la capătul rândului. Am căutat să fim discreți, dar ca să asigurăm participantul că trebuie să se relaxeze, să se simtă bine și să nu fie cu grijă dacă se întâmplă ceva.
Okay, mulțumesc foarte mult. Unfortunately, we only have a couple of minutes, so I will try to involve the people who are here. If you have any questions, I still have a question here, I guess. Domnul Fințescu? Here. Just a second.
Întrebarea mea era legată de cadrul legislativ. Nu sunt un om care să se priceapă foarte mult la asta și știu că dumneavoastră trebuie să fiți la curent cu legile. Întrebarea mea e așa. Ați spus că în toți anii în care diverse spații, aici s-a dat exemplul sălii sindicatelor, au funcționat. Dumneavoastră ați întreprins demersurile care corespundeau cadrului legislativ al acelui moment. Bun, întrebarea mea este, dumneavoastră ați sesizat, ați amendat, ca să vă citez, bine, 500 de lei și dispari. Ok, dumneavoastră ați amendat, dar dacă acolo se întâmpla o tragedie, cine era responsabil?
Deci la momentul respectiv legislația nu permitea sau nu impunea măsura complementară de sigilare de închidere. Nu era prevăzută în legislație, doar după colectiv să spun așa, s-a dat prin monitor oficial. Să spunem. Răspunderea era împărțită. În primul rând, organizatorul, acum depinde din ce cauze se întâmpla, dar bineînțeles și noi aveam o vinovăție și asta o stabilea organele abilitate.
Instanța adică?
Procuratura, instanța, bineînțeles. Dar eu am vrut să subliniez altceva, nu neapărat, nu vreau să ieșim noi din cadrul de răspundere, instituțional vorbesc. Am vrut să arăt că, din punctul meu de vedere, nu a fost bună sintagma care a circulat, de genul ce ați făcut în ultimii 5 ani, da, înainte de colectiv. Asta am vrut să spun că și la Casa de Cultură, că eram întrebat, și la Casa de Cultură au fost controale cu 10 ani, în fiecare an, timp de 10 ani înainte. Cel puțin. Putem merge și mai în jos. Însă, este foarte important și trebuie să recunoaștem, siguranța noastră, nu numai în domeniul prevenirii și stingerii incendiilor, siguranța noastră de multe ori o punem într-un rol sau în umbră, într-un rol secundar sau în umbră. Întotdeauna avem timp de toate, dar mai puțin de noi. Aici s-a întâmplat, e o problemă națională, nu e o problemă în Sibiu sau în București. E o problemă națională. Am început să ne trezim și noi, din păcate, din experiențe pe cont propriu. N-am învățat din ceea ce s-a întâmplat în Anglia, în Brazilia și în alte situații.
Lăsați-mă să reformulez întrebarea, că poate n-am întrebat eu cum trebuie. Exista vreun organ abilitat de vreo lege din România în trecut care să interzică funcționarea unui spațiu sau organizarea unui eveniment într-un spațiu care nu era potrivit sau nu corespundea normelor legale? Exista cineva care să aibă autoritatea asta?
Nu. Nu. Să interzică, eu mă refer la instituția noastră. Noi nu puteam, încă o dată spun, nu aveam în legislație măsura complementară de închidere. Nu pot să vorbesc de alte competențe. Eu vorbesc de Inspectoratul pentru Situații de Urgență, indiferent de județ, nu aveam competență să dăm această măsură complementară.
Mai avem în spate o întrebare și până ajungi acolo, I will ask Thomas, have you met any situations like this? I mean, how the things are working in your job?
Well, I mean, obviously, I see a process in this country where people try to do their best to improve things, and I understand that a conference like this shall also help to establish a better framework for everything. I mean, we as promoters in Austria, obviously, I mean, as I think every European country is also very bureaucratic, but then again, I think we have quite valid legal framework. I mean, obviously, us in Austria, people try to avoid measures and try to bribe in things, but things like that don't happen as they happen here. It's also not that I put on a festival and all of a sudden somebody tells me in the morning before I can hold my event there is a military parade going on. So that doesn't happen in Austria, luckily. And obviously I see this as a process, yeah? And if people are honest and people do their best, they will be taken serious. And I mean, Romania is part of the European Union, And although some countries want to leave the European Union, I think it's still a great union. I don't believe that you wanted to leave. Yeah, well, I don't blame you. My father-in-law is English, so I mean, I completely understand what you're going through. Now, I think it's still a great union, and I think it's still not only a economical union, but also some sort of a peace project. And I understand the difficulties, but still, I think we should aim for improvement, and I see this happening here.
Thank you. The question, please.
Two short questions for Thomas. My name is Alin, I'm a journalist. First of all, a big congrats for this year's Novorok. I think it was the best since, I know, 6 years since I went there, or 7 years. The questions, two short ones. This year's edition was held like 1 week after the terrorist threat at Rock am Ring. And my question is, did you had any, I know, big emotions, or I know, to change something in the security ways because of that threat at Rock am Ring? And my second question is regarding the things that happened in 2012 when you spoke about the moments that you had to make everyone leave the main stage and go to the tents and secure their tents and so on. And 2 hours later, if I remember, 2 shows were cancelled, Within Temptation and Marilyn Manson. And the question is, did you had any, I know, reports or mails or complaints from the festival people that I know asked for the money back, and if you did, how did you cope with those situations? Thanks.
Thank you, for example, for your kind words. It was indeed the best Novorok that we ever had, and I'm very proud of it. And your questions are 2 very good questions, because first of all, there was no terror threat at Rock am Ring. There were people overreacting, okay? And our society is not more violent since there are people from targeted countries coming to our countries. And I can remember when I was a kid, when I was young, I can remember that there were real terror acts in Spain by the ETA, in Ireland by the IRA, in Germany by the RAF, and there were lots of people dying. Obviously, I don't want to say there is no terror threat here in Europe, because, I mean, the Bataclan shooting is obvious, and other things also happened. But the most important is to take things serious, to make measurements, to keep calm, and not overreact. Yeah? And it's what happened. There is no Muslim threat in Europe, and there is no terror threat in Europe. It's just we have to cope with the situation, and we cannot expect, if we export weapons into the rest of the world, that the violence will not return to where we live. That's the first, yeah. Obviously, we took measures. We had armed police there. We had more police and security than we ever had before. We had lockers for backpacks and everything. We were prepared to what could happen, yeah. And obviously there were evacuation plans in case of a real threat and everything, yeah. It's just kind of like I think, because I mean it can happen next year. It can happen at Frequency in August. Yeah, it can happen any time. Yeah, but it's not that it's more dangerous than, for example, 5 years ago. All is as human beings, we have to stay reasonable. And I mean, after the Breivik shootings in Norway, I mean, I think these are correct, calm measures which you take as an educated society to react towards such animals. And if you do that, I think, I mean, you're not on the safe side, but I mean, it's already more than somebody can expect you to do. And regarding the cancellation of the acts, at that time when we had to cancel Marilyn Manson and Within Temptation, which were playing on one stage, the Red Stage, which is the second big open air stage at Nova Rock. We had to cancel just the acts on that stage because we have to clearly say that the guy who we rented the stage of, I mean, it was a difficult time. The year before, there were several festivals where stages collapsed and damage happened. Yeah? And it was just overreaction because we had strong winds, and he pulled up, how do you say, it's the canvas which protects the stage on the side. He pulled up the canvas, and because the wind was strong, he couldn't put it back in again. So we had to wait, and it was kind of like, obviously it was strong wind and it was not very nice, yeah. But it was pretty obvious we were insured, and we couldn't continue. Because we couldn't put that thing back in. Yeah? So we canceled the program on that stage, yeah? And we obviously offered people that bought a ticket just for that day to refund the money. Yeah? Because if you do that, yeah, there are very few people, or in this case, no one, who wanted his money back, yeah, and it's just. I think it's just about being reasonable and being fair to people and having transparent decisions. I can remember, for example, sorry, it's different, but it's about the whole communication process, yeah, because we had a show with Parkway Drive and Heaven Shall Burn, and there were two other bands playing, yeah, and then all of a sudden the tour manager decided, okay, we have to go to Italy or wherever on the next day. We start earlier because we want to finish earlier, and we made a mistake of not communicating new time schedule, yeah, and there were people starting to complain about it because they missed the opening band of 4 bands, yeah. And there was a real shitstorm coming on social media, and then I said, stop. We offer people, if they return the ticket, yeah, that they get 25% of the price back. Yeah, and then my accountant said, we cannot do this because this will cost us so much money and blah blah blah. And I said, you will see that it will not be a problem. Yeah, and the thing is. There were 2 people coming to our office, returning the tickets and claiming 25% of the price back, and the shitstorm stopped immediately, and one of the 2 people returning the money actually asked for a job in our company then. So I mean, the thing is, it's just, I think everything is about keeping it transparent and having an open communication, yeah, and then you can minimize the damage, yeah.
Professor Kemp?
Yeah, can I just say something? I agree with you about the terrorism element that you've talked about, because there are 2 different things that are now on the horizon. One is, with the IRA tax, ETA, and all of that, we didn't have social media, and we didn't have the immediacy of the terrorism right in your face, and that's one of the big difficulties. I think the second thing is, the attack methodologies that are now employed are so near to what we love and what life is all about and our values, that's what makes them more real. I mean, a bomb being left in a car where you get a 30-minute warning by the IRA isn't particularly dangerous. But when somebody drives onto a road, down a pavement, kills people, terrorists jump out the back, that really is starting to get to the very human values that you hold most dear. And I think that's why people are frightened now, or more frightened now than they were many years ago. But you're right, I still think that it's about the same as it always was. We will always have terrorist attacks, but the terrorist searches for methodologies that will shock us, and they will keep one step ahead of us all the time. And the only thing that the military and the government and the police can do is to try and outthink the terrorist to get one step ahead of what their next attack methodology will be.
Professor Kemp, and this is the last, actually, it's not a question, but it sort of is. You were involved in the investigation after the incident in Manchester?
We weren't involved in the investigation of the incident after that, no.
No, but you're familiar with that incident?
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us about, is it possible to prevent this kind of situation? Or how is it possible to avoid this kind of situation?
To avoid a situation where you have an area that is public usage the whole of the time, like the station concourse between the Manchester Arena and the station, Victoria Station itself, is very difficult because the monitoring of those areas at venues is quite low, because it's not something that you would consider because of where you are and what your event does. The difficulty also is when it's, everybody knows about this, for years and years and years it's been the norm, and that is, as an event runs down towards the end, you bring security off the doors, you get them in place to sweep the venue and to get people out. So that's the norm, that's what people do. People wait outside, that's the norm, so that's what people do. So what you're looking at there is the actual level borderline element, where that's what happens every time you put an event on. But what you're not looking for is what's different about those kind of things. So why is that person stood there outside? Well, they just blended in, waiting for somebody coming out, because people weren't expecting it. So the terrorist picks on something where they've done hostile reconnaissance, they've walked through that situation 20, 30 times maybe, they've planned it for months, knowing that that area is safe to hit because people aren't going to be looking for it. So now what's happening in the UK in a lot of the venues, and there's a conference coming up on that as well, and various other things have been taking place. And we've done a lot of work with the police in Scotland and in England about this kind of activity, is what is the norm? And should we be varying things so that when a terrorist does the hostile reconnaissance and then comes back to hit the venue, things have changed. So the timings that people move, the things that they do, the way the event is run has changed. So that kind of destabilizes the process of trying to bomb or trying to have a lone shooter who comes out and does those kind of things. Because we've been working a lot on behavioral detection. What that is you teach people who are customer care operatives just to approach people and say, why are you here? Can I help you? And that is enough to stop an attack, because then they will think they have been seen. So they will move away. And they think the reason why the guy blew himself up at the approximate time that he did at the Manchester attack was because he thought he'd been seen. So he let the explosive off before they should have been let off. Imagine 12 minutes later, 400 or 500 people in that area, what the damage might have been. So we don't know, but if somebody had seen him and had looked at him and he thought, I've been seen, and he'd let them off, and actually the person who looked at him saved an awful lot of lives. One of the things we've been discussing with the police recently is it best to sacrifice the few to save the many? A horrible, horrible thing to talk about, because you're talking about sacrificing people to make sure that not so many people die. But if you think about it carefully, it makes sense in some ways, because you're actually safeguarding the majority rather than the minority. But that's a hell of a sacrifice to make in those situations. Vigilance is good, making sure that people are changing their elements are good, but the terrorists will come back with a different methodology. You think how there's 5 methodologies we're using at the moment, or they're using at the moment. One is your normal born IED. One is a PV IED, a person-born IED. One's a vehicle-born IED. And the other 2 are, one is a vehicle used to hit people to cause maximum damage. And the second is for a vehicle to go through something and then to throw open the doors and then for terrorists to come out the back and shoot or stab people. So they've already modified their methodologies over the last 3 months by seeing what's working, what's not, and changing it each time so people aren't aware of what's going on. And the police are now reducing their response rate as much as they possibly can to get there immediately to reduce the effect and to reduce the risk on other people. And if you watched on London Bridge and you watched in Paris various activities, what happens is the police are there and they are laying their lives down on the line for the safety of the public because that's their job and it's their duty and they do it. You don't expect somebody who gets paid €5 an hour on the gate of an event to lay down their life, do you? And that's really what it's all about. Why do we pay security and crowd management people such little money when we pay hundreds of thousands of pounds for production, when actually the people who are safeguarding it are getting paid the least of anybody at the festival? Sorry, but that's a horrible thing to finish on. But it actually, that's profit versus safety.
That's also a crisis situation, so it's fine. Thank you everybody for coming here, for joining us today. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any further questions, so if you want to talk with our guests today, I think they will be available for a small chat after all.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.